the years of my life, I would say the 20 years of the 22, 3 years of working as an entertainer.
She was a global icon, a survivor and a voice that shook stadiums. But behind the music, Tina Turner kept a quiet list. 6 names she never forgot and never forgave. These weren't just industry rivals, they were people who crossed personal lines, left lasting scars, or underestimated her strength. She never blasted them in public, but her silence told the real story. Who were they, and what exactly happened behind closed doors?
It was just time to not take anymore. It was constantly abusive.
Tina Turner spent over 2 decades building one of the most iconic careers in music history. Known for her powerful voice, electrifying stage presence, and unmatched resilience, Tina's rise to fame didn't come without deep personal and professional hardship. Behind the scenes, far from the crowds and camera flashes, there were painful chapters that shaped the woman the world came to admire. Her journey wasn't just about success, it was about survival. Before she became the global sensation that headlined stadiums and broke records, Tina Turner began her music career in partnership with someone who would leave a lasting impact on both her personal life and public image. Her then husband and collaborator, Ike Turner. For many years, they were seen as a dynamic musical duo. On stage, they delivered powerful performances full of soul, rhythm, and energy. Offstage, however, the relationship told a very different story. Ike Turner played a major role in launching Tina's career. He discovered her when she was still Anna Mae Bullock, singing in St. Louis clubs. Impressed by her voice, he brought her into his band and eventually rebranded her as Tina Turner. Their professional connection quickly turned into a romantic relationship, and soon after, marriage. But their union was marked by control, manipulation, and abuse. Details that Tina herself revealed years later in her autobiography and various interviews. The abuse wasn't just emotional or verbal, it was physical, ongoing, and often brutal. Tina described how Ike controlled every aspect of her life, from her stage outfits to her finances, from her performances to her movements. Everything had to be approved or dictated by him. In her book Tina, which later inspired the film What's Love Got to Do with It, she recounts beatings, threats, and constant fear. She often felt trapped, both professionally and personally, as their lives and careers were so deeply entangled. To the public, they looked like a successful act. Their performances were filled with energy and chemistry. They released hits like River Deep, Mountain High, and Proud Mary, which became defining tracks of the era. But behind the scenes, Tina was suffering in silence. Ike's need for control wasn't limited to their music. He would isolate her, limit her freedom, and remind her constantly that she was nothing without him. For a while, she believed it. He told her that no one else would want her or believe her if she left. That emotional manipulation, combined with the constant physical abuse, made it incredibly difficult for Tina to break free. But eventually, she did. In 1976, Tina Turner made a decision that would change the rest of her life. One night, after another violent episode, she left Ike. With only 36 cents in her pocket and a gas station credit card, she fled their hotel room, bruised and terrified. She didn't have a detailed plan, just a determination not to return. She spent nights in motels, surviving on vending machine snacks and the occasional help from friends and acquaintances. Leaving Ike Turner wasn't just a personal decision, it was a professional risk. At the time, their brand was tied together. Walking away meant starting over in an industry that often wasn't kind to women, especially Black women over the age of 35. Many thought her career was finished, but Tina had different plans. She spent the next few years performing in smaller venues, appearing on variety shows, and gradually rebuilding her name as a solo artist. It wasn't easy. There were periods of financial difficulty, and she had to work harder than ever just to get noticed again. But her talent and determination were undeniable. By the early 1984 album, Private Dancer was a turning point. With hits like What's Love Got to Do with It, Tina reintroduced herself to a new generation of listeners. The album sold millions, won awards, and cemented her place in music history. not as part of a duo, but as a solo powerhouse. Throughout all of this, Tina Turner chose not to speak frequently about Ike Turner. For many years, she avoided using his name in interviews and public appearances. Her silence wasn't just a personal boundary, it was also a statement. When she did speak about the past, it was measured, focused, and often aimed at helping others understand the patterns of abuse and control. She didn't dwell on the pain for sympathy. Instead, she framed her story as one of strength and survival. In later interviews, she acknowledged that healing from that time took many years. The scars, both physical and emotional, were real. But she also made it clear that she had moved beyond those years, that she didn't want to be defined by them. Still, she remained firm in her refusal to forgive Ike, even as some tried to suggest reconciliation. In her view, forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, it was about choosing peace. And for her, that meant leaving that part of her life behind without trying to rewrite or soften it. Ike Turner died in 2007. By then, he had attempted a few times to explain or excuse his behavior, but Tina remained distant from any public efforts at reconciliation. She didn't attend his funeral and didn't release any elaborate statement. When asked about him years later, her responses remained consistent. She had survived something terrible, built a new life, and had no reason to revisit that chapter. Her story with Ike Turner became one of the most well-known examples of domestic violence in the public eye, and it sparked broader conversations about abuse in relationships, especially in the context of fame and power. It also inspired countless survivors to speak up, knowing that someone as famous and respected as Tina Turner had once faced similar struggles. By the time of her passing in 2023, Tina Turner had long been celebrated not just for her music, but for her resilience. The beginning of her story was marked by pain, but it never defined the ending. She went on to sell over 100 million records, win 8 Grammy Awards, and be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice. Tina Turner's career is a testament to what can be achieved even after the darkest beginnings. Her escape from Ike Turner marked a pivotal moment in her life, not just because it allowed her to regain her freedom, but because it showed the world the strength behind the music. She wasn't just a performer, she was a survivor, a trailblazer, and a symbol of what it means to reclaim your narrative. When we talk about Tina Turner today, we talk about her voice, her energy, her unmatched ability to light up a stage, but we also talk about her courage. The decision to walk away from abuse, to speak up when she was ready, and to rise again in a world that often doesn't give second chances. And for many, that part of her legacy is just as powerful as any song she ever recorded. Tina Turner's professional life brought her into contact with some of the biggest names in music history. As her career grew, so did her list of collaborators, peers, and rivals. Some of those relationships were built on mutual respect. Others, however, left lasting damage. Tina rarely spoke publicly about the people who disappointed or disrespected her, but there were a few incidents that left deep marks. 2 such cases involved artists she once admired, David Bowie and Aretha Franklin. In the early 1980s, David Bowie was at the peak of his fame. He was seen as a boundary-pushing figure in rock, always experimenting, always reinventing. Tina Turner by this time had re-emerged as a solo star after rebuilding her career following her split from Ike Turner. Both artists were respected, iconic, and known for pushing the limits of performance and style. The collaboration between the two seemed natural. 2 legends from different corners of music coming together to create something new. They did in fact work together on occasion. Tina and David shared the stage during a 1985 performance at the NEC Arena in Birmingham, and their version of Tonight, originally a Bowie track, became a well-known duet. On the surface, their dynamic appeared warm and charismatic. The 2 laughed and danced on stage, giving fans a glimpse of what looked like real chemistry. But behind the scenes, something had shifted. At a party in the early 1980s, During a conversation among friends and industry insiders, Bowie reportedly made comments about Tina's past. According to several second-hand accounts, he joked about her abusive relationship with Ike Turner, referring to it as something that had built character. The comment was said in a light tone, almost flippantly, but it struck a nerve. Tina, who had always been careful about how she addressed her past, was visibly uncomfortable. The room reportedly fell silent. Those close to her noticed the change in her expression. Tina smiled politely in response, but those who knew her well understood that the smile didn't reflect what she felt inside. Publicly, nothing was said. She didn't call him out or cause a scene, but from that moment, something in their relationship cooled. While they remained professional, Tina quietly pulled back. She never spoke publicly about that night, but she also never collaborated with Bowie again. It wasn't about holding a grudge for the sake of pride. For Tina Turner, certain things weren't open for mockery, especially not the years she spent surviving an abusive relationship. While many people around her, even within the music industry, may have viewed those experiences as part of her backstory or a source of tabloid curiosity, Tina saw them differently. To her, they were sacred, painful truths. She didn't use them for publicity or sympathy, and when someone treated those experiences lightly, it wasn't just insensitive, it was a betrayal. Over time, Bowie would go on to praise Tina in interviews, calling her a powerhouse and a great performer. There's no record of him addressing the rumored comments directly, but in Tina's world, actions often spoke louder than words. She didn't need to explain why she kept her distance. She simply chose not to work with him again. In an industry built on relationships and partnerships, that silence was enough to speak volumes. Another relationship that carried tension throughout Tina Turner's career was with Aretha Franklin. The two were often compared, both African-American women, both powerhouse vocalists, and both considered queens in their own right. Tina was dubbed the Queen of Rock and Roll, while Aretha was the undisputed Queen of Soul. From the outside, it may have seemed like they existed in separate lanes, but in the music industry, where comparisons are constant and media narratives shape public perception, their paths frequently overlapped. Their professional rivalry wasn't the sort that played out in interviews or tabloid feuds. Instead, it was mostly silent, built on mutual observation and subtle tension. People who worked behind the scenes at award shows and industry events often noted that the two women rarely interacted. They might share a dressing room corridor or appear on the same program, but there was no visible camaraderie. The distance between them reportedly deepened in the late 1960s and 1970s as Tina's star began to rise. Aretha Franklin, long seen as the standard-bearer of vocal excellence, was said to be wary of Tina's increasing popularity, especially given the difference in their musical styles. Aretha came from a gospel and soul background with an emphasis on vocal purity and emotional depth. Tina, meanwhile, was known for her raw energy, gravelly voice, and dynamic performances that often leaned into rock and roll. According to industry lore, Aretha once made a comment during a rehearsal, reportedly saying, "She screams, I sing." The remark was never officially confirmed, but it became part of the narrative that surrounded their relationship. Whether it was actually said or not, it reflected the perceived difference in how each artist was viewed and, more importantly, how they may have viewed each other. Tina never responded publicly to the comment. She didn't speak negatively about Aretha Franklin in interviews. In fact, she often avoided talking about the comparisons at all. Instead, she seemed to channel any tension into her performances. Every time she stepped on stage, she gave it everything she had: physicality, emotion, and stamina. For Tina, the stage was her space, her rebuttal to any doubts or criticisms. The rivalry remained mostly under the surface for years. There were occasional moments where their careers intersected, such as joint award show appearances or nominations, but collaboration was never on the table. At one point in the early 980s, producers reportedly approached both artists about recording a duet. Aretha was open to the idea, but Tina declined. There was no public explanation, no scandal, just a quiet no. In the world of celebrity and music, sometimes silence says more than a press release. Over the years, some fans hoped for a reconciliation or a collaboration that would bring the two legends together. But it never happened. The coolness remained. When they appeared at the same events, they kept their distance. There were no public feuds, no dramatic encounters, just a shared understanding that they existed in different orbits. Despite their differences, both Tina and Aretha maintained careers that shaped modern music. Each brought something distinct to the table, and both opened doors for future generations of female performers. Still, the lack of connection between the two remained noticeable. When Aretha Franklin passed away in 2018, Tina released a short statement offering condolences. It was respectful and heartfelt, focusing on Aretha's impact on music and her incredible voice. There was no mention of rivalry or personal history, just a brief tribute from one music legend to another. In reflecting on these two complicated relationships, one with David Bowie and one with Aretha Franklin, it becomes clear that Tina Turner operated on her own terms. She didn't engage in public drama, and she didn't retaliate when hurt. Instead, she used distance and silence as a form of control. She chose who to collaborate with, who to keep close, and who to keep out. That kind of quiet boundary setting is rare in a world where many are encouraged to speak loudly and constantly. Tina Turner didn't need to explain herself. She let her work, her performances, and her longevity in the industry speak for her. Whether it was a careless comment from a collaborator or a rivalry born from comparison, she responded in her own way, calmly, firmly, and without apology. As the years went by, Tina continued to maintain that quiet strength. Her ability to endure, to navigate complex relationships without losing sight of her values, became one of the defining elements of her legacy. In an industry where personal and professional lines often blur, Tina Turner drew hers clearly, and she stood by them. As Tina Turner reached new heights in her solo career during the 1980s, her place in the music industry shifted dramatically. No longer part of a duo, she had become a global force in her own right. Someone whose presence and success were difficult to ignore. With that success came comparisons, challenges, and occasionally friction with other artists. Two such cases, one involving pop icon Madonna and the other with influential producer Phil Spector, illustrate how Tina responded when she felt disrespected or let down, not with public outrage, but with distance and control over her own narrative. By the mid-1980s, Madonna had become one of the biggest names in pop. She was bold, provocative, and constantly in the media spotlight. Her style blended music with performance art, often pushing boundaries in ways that generated headlines. At the same time, Tina Turner was enjoying a remarkable comeback. Her 1984 album, Private Dancer, had produced massive hits and put her back on top of the charts. She was in her mid-40s, an age where many female artists were often written off, yet she was breaking records and filling stadiums. Madonna's rise naturally led to comparisons. Some critics noted similarities in stage presence, the commanding performances, the confidence, the use of fashion and movement to elevate a show. Many said Madonna's style owed a debt to Tina's earlier work. After all, Tina had been delivering high-energy, fashion-forward performances long before Madonna became a household name. While Tina didn't seem to mind being cited as an influence, what bothered her was the lack of acknowledgement and, more importantly, the public attitude that suggested she had become irrelevant. In interviews during the 1980s, Madonna was often asked about older artists. Her responses were usually aimed at reinforcing her own place as a new kind of performer, modern, edgy, and different from the generation that came before. But in doing so, she sometimes appeared dismissive of artists who had paved the way. Tina Turner, who had fought hard to regain control of her career and reputation, took this personally, being described, even indirectly, as out of touch, was not just criticism. For someone who had rebuilt her life from the ground up, it felt like erasure. Tina didn't address the situation publicly. She never mentioned Madonna by name in relation to any tension, nor did she engage in media commentary about it, but people around her noticed the chill. When both artists attended a gala in 1992, one of many high-profile events where stars gathered, there was no interaction between the two. They didn't exchange greetings, didn't pose for photographs together, and didn't speak. For those familiar with Tina's approach, that silence was telling. Rather than engage in a public feud, Tina let her music and success speak for themselves. Private Dancer was a massive commercial and critical success. It sold over 10 million copies worldwide, earned multiple Grammy Awards, and reinforced her image as a legend with staying power. While younger artists came and went, Tina remained relevant through her talent, discipline, and professionalism. Her ability to avoid public drama didn't mean she lacked strong opinions. Quite the opposite. Tina Turner was known for setting clear boundaries and sticking to them. If someone crossed a line, even unintentionally, she often chose to distance herself completely, rather than argue or try to change the person's perspective. With Madonna, the perceived lack of respect created a divide that was never publicly addressed, but never repaired either. The situation with producer Phil Spector played out differently, but left its own lasting impact. Phil Spector was one of the most influential figures in 20th century music. Known for his wall of sound production style, he worked with countless iconic artists, including the Beatles, the Ronettes, and the Righteous Brothers. He also had a reputation for being difficult, controlling, and unpredictable. Spector once described Tina Turner as one of the most powerful female voices in music. He admired her ability to deliver emotion and intensity in a way few others could. For Tina, who had worked hard to rebuild her image as a solo artist, the opportunity to work with a producer of his stature seemed like a major milestone. At the time, Spector was selective about who he worked with. That he showed interest in Tina was taken seriously. Plans were made for a collaboration. Studio sessions were discussed. Tina rearranged parts of her schedule, began preparing material, and worked on getting her voice ready for what was expected to be a significant recording opportunity. According to people familiar with the situation, she was excited, optimistic, that this would be an important next step in her artistic journey. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. Spector, without warning, pulled out of the project. He didn't call, didn't offer an explanation. Tina and her team learned through the industry grapevine that he had chosen to work with Ronnie Spector instead. The decision was never officially addressed, and no apology was ever offered. The silence that followed wasn't just unprofessional, it was humiliating. For Tina, who had taken the collaboration seriously and prepared accordingly, the experience was deeply disappointing. As with other moments of betrayal in her career, Tina didn't go to the media to air her frustration. She didn't speak badly of Phil Spector in interviews or seek to correct the record. Instead, she let her silence express how she felt. When asked about him in later years, she offered no elaborate answers. The topic was usually met with short responses or a simple change of subject. It became one of those incidents that shaped how she approached trust and collaboration going forward. Phil Spector's legacy would become more complicated in the years that followed, especially after his conviction for murder in 2009. But for Tina, the disappointment stemmed not from his later actions, but from the feeling of being used and then dismissed without explanation. In a business filled with egos and shifting loyalties, she valued professionalism. What happened with Spector didn't just feel personal, it felt like a disregard for her time, talent, and effort. Through both the Madonna and Phil Spector experiences, a consistent theme in Tina Turner's career emerges. She demanded respect, not through confrontation, but through consistency. When that respect was denied, whether by a dismissive comment, a careless joke, or a broken promise, she rarely responded with public anger. She didn't seek revenge. Instead, she made quiet decisions that reflected her values. She chose who to work with, who to trust, and who to keep at a distance. This approach, allowed her to focus on what mattered most: her art, her performances, and her integrity. She had lived through enough public scrutiny and private pain. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. And when others failed to see the weight of that journey, she didn't explain it to them. She simply moved on. By the time she stepped away from the music industry in the early 2000s, Tina Turner had built a career defined not just by talent, but by principle. She had weathered storms, reinvented herself multiple times, and remained a relevant and respected figure for over 5 decades. The stories of tension with people like Madonna and Phil Spector weren't the defining features of her legacy, but they did offer a glimpse into the standards she held and how she quietly upheld. Tina Turner didn't seek conflict, but she also didn't tolerate disrespect. Her method of dealing with difficult relationships was unique, calm, deliberate, and final. In a world that often rewards loud responses, she chose the strength of silence. And for many, that silence was louder than any headline. In the music world, high-profile collaborations often generate excitement among fans and industry professionals alike. When two iconic performers come together, the potential can be enormous, both artistically and commercially. One such pairing that promised to be remarkable on paper was between Tina Turner and Elton John. Both had commanding stage presence, international fame, and a long history of breaking boundaries in their respective genres. But behind the scenes, the chemistry didn't match the headlines. Their short-lived attempt to collaborate revealed not only clashing personalities, but also Tina Turner's uncompromising standards when it came to professionalism and respect. Their planned performance was for a televised special in the late 1990s. The concept was simple: two music legends from different genres sharing a stage, bridging generations and styles. Rehearsals began with a level of anticipation. Fans expected a powerful duet filled with energy, charisma, and the unique edge each artist brought to their music. But things didn't unfold smoothly once the work actually started. The servants singing. And the work. From the beginning, Tina came into the rehearsals with clear expectations. She was known for being focused, direct, and meticulous. Every detail mattered to her, from choreography to vocal phrasing to how the music was arranged. Having spent years building her solo career from the ground up, Tina knew how important preparation was. She didn't tolerate chaos, and she expected those around her to match her level of commitment. Elton John, while no less talented, brought a different energy to the project. He was famous for his flamboyant style and creative spontaneity. Known for his incredible musicianship and elaborate shows, he also had a reputation for being temperamental, especially when under pressure or faced with strong personalities. During rehearsals, tensions reportedly began when Tina pushed for changes and requested more focus from Elton. She felt that he wasn't taking the rehearsal process seriously enough, and she wasn't shy about saying so. At one point, according to various reports and Elton's own later comments, Tina criticized his playing, his timing, and even his appearance. Elton, feeling attacked and frustrated, fired back, calling her controlling and accusing her of treating the rehearsal like a military operation. What started as a creative disagreement escalated into a heated argument. Voices were raised, emotions flared, and the atmosphere quickly became tense. A microphone stand was allegedly knocked over during the shouting, further underlining just how far the situation had unraveled. Despite the tension, the performance went ahead. On stage, both artists smiled and delivered a polished set. To the outside world, nothing seemed amiss, but those who knew the backstory noticed something. During the performance, Tina and Elton barely looked at each other. There was no warmth, no shared energy. Just two professionals, delivering their parts and then stepping away. After the performance, the two did not work together again. Elton John later described the experience in interviews as difficult, saying that working with Tina had been challenging and that their personalities simply didn't match. He acknowledged her talent and influence, but made it clear that their time together hadn't been easy. Tina, true to form, did not speak publicly about the incident. She didn't correct the story or offer her version. As with many other uncomfortable situations in her career, she chose silence. Her approach wasn't about avoiding conflict, but about preserving her energy. Tina had learned through experience that not every battle was worth fighting in the press. She didn't chase headlines or engage in disputes for the sake of appearances. Instead, she let others tell their version while maintaining her own privacy and dignity. Those close to her said that Tina respected Elton John's talent, but found him difficult to work with. She believed in preparation, precision, and respect for everyone's time. When those principles weren't shared, she found it hard to continue a working relationship. Her attitude wasn't shaped by ego, but by experience. Having spent years in a controlling and abusive relationship early in her career, she had developed a deep need to feel safe, heard, and respected in all aspects of her professional life. That need often meant keeping a firm line between what she would tolerate and what she wouldn't. The fallout with Elton John was another example of Tina's ability to protect herself without public confrontation. She didn't speak ill of him, didn't use the moment to boost her image, and didn't allow it to define her. She simply moved on. That quiet control became one of her most defining characteristics, not just as an artist, but as a person navigating a notoriously difficult industry. When looking back at the series of conflicts or disappointments Tina experienced with other artists, whether it was Ike Turner, David Bowie, Aretha Franklin, Madonna, Phil Spector, or Elton John, a pattern emerges. It was never about public revenge or media manipulation. Tina didn't use these moments to stir controversy. Instead, she made choices. She chose silence. She chose distance. She chose to keep moving forward. Her strength wasn't just in her voice or her stage presence, but in her ability to walk away when necessary. She didn't need to expose others or justify her actions. She believed in standing firm in her own values and letting her work speak for itself. In an industry where reputations can be built or broken by a single quote or reaction, Tina Turner's restraint was both rare and powerful. Her story serves as a reminder that success isn't just about talent, it's also about resilience, boundaries, and clarity. Tina had all three. She understood the cost of letting others control her narrative, and after escaping a life where that control was taken from her, she never allowed it again. Even in moments when others disappointed her, whether by mocking her past, dismissing her contributions, or letting her down professionally, Tina never lost sight of who she was. She didn't seek to erase the pain, but she also didn't allow it to define her future. She used it as fuel, turning setbacks into stage triumphs and disappointment into determination. By the time she retired from performing, Tina Turner had built a body of work that spanned decades and crossed genres. Her influence could be seen in artists from all backgrounds, rock, soul, pop, and beyond. Younger performers often cited her as a role model, even when she herself avoided the spotlight in her later years. In interviews near the end of her life, Tina spoke more openly about peace, healing, and how far she had come. But she remained clear that some experiences had left lasting marks. She didn't pretend to forgive everyone. She didn't try to rewrite the past. And she never once apologized for setting limits. For Tina, some wounds never healed fully, and that was okay. She didn't need closure from others. Her closure came from choosing who to keep in her life and who to leave behind. Tina Turner's career wasn't just built on stage lights and hit songs. It was shaped by the way she handled conflict, disappointment, and betrayal. The 6 names that caused her pain weren't publicly shamed or called out in interviews. They weren't turned into dramatic stories or exaggerated feuds, but they were part of the story. Chapters she didn't revisit, but didn't forget either. Her silence about these relationships wasn't weakness. It was power. Power in knowing her worth. Power in refusing to argue. Power in continuing to rise no matter who tried to stand in her way. Tina Turner didn't need revenge. She had resilience. She had success. And most importantly, she had freedom. The kind that can only come from walking through fire and coming out the other side stronger, wiser, and unshaken.